get All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We're just thrilled to have this discussion and that you could be part of our 2023 Self-Direction Virtual Conference Series. My name is Molly Morris, and I am a Vice President at Applied Self-Direction, and I'm just thrilled to be having our final session today in the series. I can hardly believe it, but I think this is going to be a great way to end our series to talk about top strategies for effective support brokerage. So thank you again for being here. I'm just going to run through a few quick housekeeping issues before we get started. So your audio and video have been automatically turned off. If you do have any comments or questions, please just submit those via the Q&A box on the bottom toolbar. We will address as many of your questions as possible at the end of the session. The session is being recorded and it will be available on our website following today's session. And closed captions for the entire conference series are available courtesy our premier sponsor, Avero. So thank you to Avero. And before we get started introducing our panelists, I just wanted to say how thrilled I am that this is the topic for our final session, because I know in our working with folks across the country, talking about self-direction, I know many of you have really been looking at how can we make information and assistance thrive and really work for people. Many of you maybe have well-established practices in your state with people who are in a support broker or similar role with lots of experience. But I know many other states, this is a new concept that maybe you have only heard of and thought about. So I hope today can really be helpful regardless of what level of experience your own state has. And just, I'm using the term information and assistance, which is kind of the term used across the country to describe the supports that are provided to people who self-direct to really help them know how to fill the role. So getting that coaching and support to understand, how do you self-direct? None of us are born knowing how to be an employer or how to deal with some of these tricky issues. So really being that support and in helping someone to be in charge of their own services and supports and really respecting that model. So all that to say, I'm just thrilled to be digging into this topic today and what this role looks like. And we have an excellent group of panelists here. So I'm just going to introduce those folks and we're going to dive right in. So with us today, we have Christy Culbreath. And she has worked with Marylanders with disabilities since moving to Baltimore from South Carolina in 2013. Isn't it crazy that 2013 is long ago now? It doesn't seem possible. She worked as a support broker throughout Maryland until 2022. And Christy now leads the self-direction model for the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Administration. So Christy, we're so glad to have you. Christiana Morales is the Director of Self-Determination Program Projects at Disability Voices United in California. She is also the parent of a 21-year-old who is in his second year of self-determination, and that's a self-direction model in California. And Christiana is an independent facilitator and person-centered planner. And Pam Zotnia has 30 plus years of experience working in human services, supporting people with disabilities to self-direct their own lives. She is currently employed as the Director of Participant-Directed Supports at Values into Action in Pennsylvania. And she shares her home with her 36-year-old son, Robert, who chose to self-direct his supports and services. So we've got the right people at the table to have a good conversation. And to get us started, I'd love it if each of you could speak to a little bit more about what brought you to this field and this area of work. So Pam, if you don't mind getting us started.
Soon as I unmute myself. And sure, thanks, Molly. I am thrilled to be here. So as Molly mentioned, I share my home with my son, Robert, who is a person with disability who self-directs his life. So he is truly the reason I went into this field many years ago. But what brought me to where I am today is sort of the journey Robert and I have gone on. When he was a young child and getting ready to go to school, was sort of on the cusp of inclusion happening in school districts. And And that was something that we wanted for him. He wanted to go to school with the neighborhood kids, where the same school his sister went to, and they weren't really doing that quite yet where we live. So that was sort of our first, I don't want to say battle, because it was not a battle. It was a non-negotiable for us. And in working with the school district, we came to an agreement that Robert would be the first child with significant disabilities who would be in a typical classroom. And then and it was very successful. I want to put that out there. They were wonderful. And fast forward to adult life, we all hear about that cliff that we fall off of, families, people with disabilities, when you exit school. It's a steep cliff. We were fortunate that Robert had already received a waiver prior to exiting school. So we had some supports and services for him. But supporting a person at home who has significant disabilities does create a great deal of challenge. I exited the workforce when he was born because he had some significant needs. And then when I decided to re-enter the workforce, I exited the workforce when we were using typewriters and word processors, and I re-entered the workforce in the age of computers and internet, and really felt out of my comfort zone. So I decided to enter the field of working with people with disabilities. I did a variety of things. I worked direct support in group home settings, supporting people. The scheduling worked for my family. My husband would work during the day. I'd be home with Robert, and then I'd go to work at night and he'd be home with Robert. Did that for a bit of time and realized not really liking this model all that much. And my employer also was noticing that I was a little bit resistant to some of the decisions they were making. So I was offered a position with a local chapter of the ARC as the local advocate, and I took that job. I had done volunteer work with them and actually had sat on their board for several years. And then, for about a year later, I became the director of that chapter of the ARC. And in those 15 years, approximately 15 years, I met many, many people with disabilities and many, many families who were struggling just as mine was. And it gave me the opportunity to help them learn about their rights, learn about the rules and regulations that we need to follow. And I put them on a journey and helped them through that journey to really create the lives that they deserved and desired. I did that for quite a long time. It was a stressful job. I'm not going to lie to you. We were a small chapter, a lot of fundraising, a lot of, staying up at night. How am I going to pay my staff to do the good work they do? And that stress combined with the stress, not that my son Robert is stressful to me, but the life he lives can create stress for us. And he has some medical challenges. So I made a decision to pivot my career. I didn't want to leave advocacy. I didn't want to leave supporting people with disabilities, especially families like mine. So I spoke with a colleague, Marian Fraterola Salino, who is the CEO of Values into Action, and said, what do you think about the idea of me coming on as like a part-time supports broker? And I can support the people in my community in the northeastern part of Pennsylvania who are having challenges with self-directing and all that encompasses, the employer-related duties, etc. And she said, sure, come on. I thought I was going to work part-time, and Robert and I were going to garden and go to the park. And I realized I'm actually sort of addicted to work. So I quickly became a full-time employee, and we chose to grow the brokerage across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So we now serve everyone. We serve every county in Pennsylvania. We don't serve every person. So that's kind of a really brief description of my journey to where I got to today. But I do want to add to that this, although some of the days are challenging, as any job is, this job that I have right now has been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. That's it.
What a great way to start us off. Thanks, Pam. Christiana, why don't you tell us about your background?
I started out in special education advocacy, and I'm actually retired from that. I did it for over 2 decades. We are a foster family, and so we worked with specifically kids with autism who were transitioning out of the program and wanted to make sure they had services and supports in place as they were starting their lives. And that's really kind of what set me down the path of realizing how important person-centeredness was, and learning from a very young age to advocate for themselves. And so that is my passion. I currently, so California is very different than the rest of the country. And so what we have are regional centers. We have 21 of them who provide the services. And self-determination actually just came available to everybody in California, June of 2021. So it's very new to us. So I'm here to learn from all of you. And with that came something they called independent facilitation. And it is not connected to any government agency. We are literally independent. There is no required training. There's no certification. So it's a little bit of Wild West in California right now of what that's going to look like and how it's going to land. And so I really wanted to move from individual advocacy, which I loved, but is difficult because for every person you help, you find 10 more people, 100 more people who have the exact same problem, and realized I wanted to work on systemic change of we got to fix the problem, not individually, it's not changing. And so that's how I ended up working for Disability Voices United, who were the ones who actually got the self-determination program law passed in California. And so that's our story.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here, Christiana. Can't wait to hear about all things going on in California. And last but not least, Christy, tell us about your backstory.
Absolutely. So just first, I want to just give a quick thank you to Applied Self-Direction for the whole virtual series. And I'm just really happy that we're talking about support brokers today because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. Like Molly mentioned, I moved to Baltimore in 2013 from South Carolina. So sometimes my Southern accent comes out when I start talking. I was doing an AmeriCorps position, so I was placed at a day program and really cut my teeth in those spaces, learning from self-advocates and other folks about dignity of risk, and eventually found self-direction through a really great mentor who I actually think is on the call today, which is odd and fun. And so I spent the last 5 years, or I spent 5 years working directly for people in the state of Maryland as their support broker, and really developed a passion for self-direction because I think it can both be an answer to how people have more control over their lives and competitive employment and social justice for people, especially in cities like Baltimore. So that's me. I'm not a support broker anymore, but I miss it every day. I've spent the last year working for our state to help develop our program to be the best it can be. So I'm just really happy to be here today to talk about a job that I miss a lot.
Oh, thank you, Christy. I'm sure you're missed in that role too. Well, to dig in a little bit, I mentioned that there are a lot of folks across the country who maybe don't have explicitly a support broker type role, or maybe you're just starting to recruit and hire for these types of roles. So given all that, it would be really wonderful to hear about your favorite parts of this job, why you love it, what works for you about this job. Christiana, do you want to kick us off and talk to you about your experience?
So in California, we have a very large problem with disparity in our traditional system. And so one of the things that we're really finding with self-determination and having support brokers is really reaching out to these communities who had no services and helping them find the services, know that most of them don't even know they're out there. They describe it as going to a restaurant with no menu, and you sit down and they say, what do you want? And like, well, what do you have? Like, I don't know. It's like a secret out there. So really having the ability to show people how many supports and services really are out there, and that they do not have to go it alone. I think it's amazing. There's like this almost light bulb when you're working with people that really think they are alone in this, and so many families are recreating the wheel. It's like it's already here, that where there's things out there. And so I love that. I love getting to know the families and the participants. Person-centered planning is like my favorite thing. That is just, and like every one of them become part of my family along the way to really get to know them and share their hopes and dreams. And I think one of the things I see quite often is that for some of them, this is the first time anybody's asked them what they want, what their hopes and dreams are. And they're almost surprised to be asked, because they've been told for so long, this is what you can have, or this is what you can, this is all we're going to give you, kind of a thing. So that's what I love about my job.
Wonderful. Love to hear that. Christy, tell us about why you miss your job, what you loved about it.
Yeah, happy to. So as a support broker, and this might be some of my personality, but I really love the variety in the things that I was able to do every day. In any given day, I might meet with someone who is very new to self-direction to help them write an employee handbook. And then I might go drive across the state and meet someone who is interviewing their 20th employee and starting something new with them, and then sit down with someone trying to move out of a group home, all in the same week, in the same day. Just always really exciting things to do. And I'd echo what Christiana shared about disparity and being an answer to some of that. I did feel when you're working really closely with people, you can see their lives change really practically every day when they have real choice and control over their lives. And so I miss being a part of people's teams and seeing their growth, and seeing how when you just give them control, when control is very clearly with them, that they're living their best lives. So I miss that.
And Pam, what about you? What made you fall in love with this job?
First of all, I echo what both Christy and Christiana said. We are fortunate in Pennsylvania that we have a very robust waiver, especially when it comes to participant-directed services, the self-directed services. But what we find is many people with disabilities and their families aren't even aware of the participant-directed service model. And they feel they have no choice except to accept traditional services. Traditional model services are not bad services, but it always, I've spoken to so many people in my career who have thought, when I get older, my son, daughter, brother, sister, whoever it is, will have no choice but to go to the group home. I've never spoken to a person with a disability who said, I can't wait to grow up and move to the group home. It's just something that always kind of happened. So I would have to say my favorite part of what I do is helping people realize they have choice and they can control their services. I've seen it happen. I've seen people blossom and grow. And my son is one of those people who, once he truly took control of his life and, chose his own staff who were the right fit for him. They weren't just, a person who was looking for a job. We interviewed a ton of people who were good people and we referred them out to others, but they just weren't the right fit for what Robert was looking for. He put together a team of guys who support him, who have been here for years. They're never leaving until they retire. They've told us that. They've even shared that on the bad days, and there's always bad days, they love their job because they're helping him. They look at it a little differently, where it's not like I'm going to work at the group home day program, whatever traditional program people are in, and I'm going to help everybody there, but I'm going to do a lot of paperwork. We turned that around to, you're here to be Robert's assistant. Robert obviously has an ISP that drives what the services and and what their responsibilities are. But it's really about, they show up in the morning, they help Robert look at his Google Calendar. What do you have happening today? How are we going to make that happen? What do I need to do to help you? Not to do it for you, but to do it side by side with you, partner with you, but really amplify your voice and make sure that everything you want is happening. There's a motto that self-advocates have that my son reminds me of almost every day: nothing about me without me. And it's truly happening. And to be able to share that with other families who also are just, I could speak as a family member. We go to bed at night wondering what will happen when I'm no longer here. What will happen to our loved one? What's the answer? Helping them by using the person-centered tools, things like the Charting the Life Course framework, to put that puzzle together and figure out answers, is so incredibly rewarding. And I've had many moms, dads, and siblings say to me, we never really saw the vision for the future until we realized that self-direction is a path that we can use. And we will never have all the answers. It will always evolve. We will always be looking for what's next and what's better. But to give people hope, it's hope that they have now, and to see them really making the decisions for themselves, and not us constantly telling people this is what's best for you, is incredibly rewarding.
It's beautiful to hear. Speaking a little more of your role and how you've been able to be successful, what do you think are the 3 most important qualities a support broker, or whatever you call it in your state, should possess? Christy, do you want to start us on that one?
I can, yeah. So I think the first thing for me has always and will always be enthusiasm. So when someone is enthusiastic about self-direction, others can get excited about it too. I found that a lot of people are sometimes pretty scared to self-direct because there are so many choices and directions that people can go in. And so just being enthusiastic and sharing that anyone can self-direct, regardless of impact of disability, really goes a long way. And of course, I think it's important to be organized. This is something that is not in my nature, that I really had to work on. But when you work for multiple people who are in different stages of their self-directed journey, being organized is really key. And finally, I think a willingness to ask for help. Often support brokers are coming from the disability field, which is really great. Person-centered planning, especially in self-direction, requires expertise in areas outside of the field, though. So people might need a realtor to buy a house, or a connection to a company that they want to work in, or a fitness instructor to learn all things yoga. And support brokers might not have those expertise in those areas. And so the best support brokers I know acknowledge that and then ask others to bring that expertise to the table to support people best.
Really good advice. Pam, what are your thoughts on the most important qualities?
So this is a very timely question. We're actually in Pennsylvania. We're part of a learning collaborative with the NCAPS team, and one of the things that we've been working on in partnership with our state Office of Developmental Programs, our policy folks, is to update the supports broker certification and recertification process that we use. So as part of that, we surveyed multiple stakeholders, supports brokers, people who receive supports, common law employers, managing employers, supports coordinator, everyone. We surveyed everyone to see what everyone's opinion was. And of course, when we wrote the surveys, we had our own opinion. So it was sort of written as multiple choice, where we put things in we thought were important to gauge that interest. And they came back exactly as I anticipated. So what I feel, and what most people agree with me, is that a good support broker needs to have the skills to facilitate group meetings and conversations. That's not to take away the role of the supports coordinator, who has a very, very, very important role in developing the ISP and driving that team. But those other meetings, the team meeting of, the staff within your house, your natural supports, your family, to help you plan, and to help make sure the person with the disability's voice is heard as they choose it to be, not to speak for them, but to help them. That's one thing. Person-centered planning and thinking. You can't be a supports broker if you don't have that skill. Excuse me. But really, one of the really important things that is a skill that people need, it's not even a skill, it's knowledge, is having the knowledge of the program rules and regulations. There's a lot of rules and regulations that people who self-direct and their families need to follow, because we're accepting Medicaid funds. So whenever you accept Medicaid funds, there's rules and regulations. Families aren't always knowledgeable of that, nor do families want to read policy and waivers and regs and rules, because you can't even understand it. It was written by bureaucrats, and most people, it spins their heads. So the brokers need to have that knowledge. We spend a great deal of time in our supports brokerage training our brokers on that, making sure they're familiar with it, interpreting it for them, so that they can take that back to the families, to the self-advocates who are self-directing, so they understand what their role is, their responsibilities are, and they remain in compliance with those roles, because that's really, really important. Those are my three.
Thank you, Pam. Christiana, what are your three? What do you look for in a good support broker?
I actually agree with both Christy and Pamela so much, and I'm going to kind of echo some of it. I think number one is you have to be a good listener, and that so many people in their lives think that they know what's best for them and will tell them what they need. And I think so to be a good broker, you have to be a good listener. The second one is that you have to really, truly believe the philosophy of person-centered thinking. Because and in so many ways, I see this as civil rights. And I think that has to kind of be the core and the heart of where you're coming from. And the last piece is that you have to be a skilled generalist, that you have to know so much about, like, I think both of you talked about all of these different areas that, and the nuances. And because it's difficult to have all of that knowledge, having the support brokers have their own circles of support and places to reach out to, and so you can, because nobody knows everything. So having that place to reach, oh, I have this person who knows all about housing, or this person knows all about, and so having the network to get help when you need it. I think Christy had said that as well. So.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we know one of the biggest challenges that people who self-direct face, especially right now in this country, is hiring workers and finding workers. What are some of your most creative or successful recruitment strategies that you've been able to help either support the people with who you self-direct, give them that idea, or maybe ideas that you've learned from people who self-direct in terms of strategies that you've seen really work well? Pam, what are your thoughts on that?
So you are right. We all know that recruiting is always challenging, but has been exceptionally challenging in the last few years. We use the traditional methods, job boards, things like Indeed. We're not always successful with that. So we're always looking for what other ways can we do that? So we have had people who have been successful in posting job ads in Facebook groups, private Facebook groups, literally going around neighborhoods, maybe if the person belongs to a church or a synagogue, posting flyers there where people know them, really customizing those job ads to the person. So, it's not the traditional looking for a caregiver, DSP type, direct support person type ad. It's more customized to the person. So for example, for my son, if we were needing to recruit, which knock on wood, we haven't had to in a few years, we wouldn't be saying person with a disability looking for. We would be saying, 36-year-old artist and activist looking for someone to assist him throughout the day. And maybe at the end of the ad, it might refer to the fact that he has a disability. But, that way we're targeting people who are interested in art. They're interested in activism and social justice. They have that fit. We also, so in New Jersey, the New Jersey Collaborative has created something called an interactive map, which we're hoping to expand into Pennsylvania, which is an incredibly cool tool where the person who self-directs can post on that I'm looking for staff, but also organizations and people who are job shopping can go on that map, and it's like a matching tool. So it's not something where like there's a big giant room full of staff and pick one, but it's literally matching people together. So we're excited that they're looking to expand that into other states, and that concept I think would work really well. But again, recruiting is challenging. It always is, and always will be. If there was a magic answer, we would be so freaking happy.
Thanks, Pam. I was delayed on unmuting myself because I was furiously Googling for the link to that map to share with people. I think Casey will share that in the chat, but I can also say one of our previous virtual conference sessions, we had somebody from New Jersey speaking specifically about that interactive map if people are interested in learning more about it. So thanks for highlighting that, Pam. Christy, recruitment strategies, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I think I agree with Pam. The challenge is the DSP crisis. I think we live in a field, and we work in a field where many great people are being pulled from it every day to work in other areas that are going to pay higher. The good news, I think, is that in self-direction, it does give people the chance of retaining employees by giving competitive wages and offering good benefits packages. That's something I'm pretty passionate about in general, is making sure that participant employers understand all the benefits that they could be giving their employees. But just like Pam mentioned, I think we also know that people stay in their jobs that they love when they like to come to work. And that's why when I was working for people, we spent a lot of time coming up with job descriptions and strategies to find employees with the same interests as the employer. So for example, I worked for someone who loved swimming so much, it mattered more to her that her employees would get in the pool with her than if they had any kind of experience with disability. So that's what we focused on. In the ads, we made that clear to the top. You got to be able to swim. You got to be cool with it. And we posted those in the gym and at smoothie shops and places where people who swim would be. We share. And then finally, we found a yoga instructor who did not have any experience working for a person with a disability, hadn't actually spoken to a person with a disability really, but she was able to teach that employee how to support her with the support needs that she had. And the employee, they ended up having a really great friendship with one another because they got to do what they love together every day. So I think those are the best when you can find the match, like Pam said. That matters more sometimes than competitive wages and benefits. But
Great example. Thank you for sharing that. Christiana, what about you?
I don't have a lot to add. I actually agree with both Pamela and Christy. In the California self-determination program, the participant gets to set the wage. We're given a budget, and then we can spend our spending plan however we choose, which means we do get to set the rate and the benefits, which has helped enormously. So that piece has been very beneficial. And then absolute same thing is using a very like person-centered version of job searching, because like both of you said, you can teach somebody the support pieces. You can't teach somebody to want to be interested in what you're interested in. And so, you know, having somebody who likes horror movies is going to go sit in horror movies with you and enjoy them is very different than somebody who's going to sit on their cell phone or stand off to the side. And so that really is the key, not only to hiring, but retaining, is those people then love their jobs and they want to stay. So if we can pay them well and we can find somebody who actually is enjoying just as much as the employer, then that's the key, I think. So.
Thank you. That's such a
Yeah.
good.
Help find people find their dream jobs. Right. That's the.
I love that. I love that. I love the example of the horror movies, because you really do either hate horror movies or love horror movies, and you want to have that compatibility. Switching gears a little bit, what training did you each receive to be a support broker, and what ongoing support or training would be helpful if you could get it? Christiana, you go ahead first.
So as I said, in California, there is no required training, certification, schooling, nothing yet. They are talking about eventually creating one. Many of the people who are in this field come from special education advocacy. There is training, but no required certification for special education advocacy. And a lot of them come from being family members who are paying it forward. They've been doing this for so many years. They figured out the system and have said, I want to help others navigate this challenge. I am like really intrigued by what Pamela was talking about. Their training, we're going to have to connect and see what theirs. I would love to see what theirs is. And really understanding kind of the things that we talked about are 3 important things. Right? List all those need to be in that training. And we are struggling in this state with people who, because there's no set rate, there are people who are charging way too much and taking advantage. And so there is an absolute concern here, and who are just not trained, do not know what they're doing. And so we need to get on that in this state. So
helpful to hear about that experience, to be sure. Christy, back when you got started, what kind of training did you receive?
Yeah, so in Maryland, we certify our support brokers with a training in worldview. So we're making sure that support brokers understand that people are in the driver's seat, and essentially a overview of our waiver services and what are the parameters for our requirements for self-direction are. Informally, as a support broker, I was trained in HR practices, which I think is crucial to help people figure out what self-direction looks like for them. It's something I feel pretty passionate about when I think about making our support broker training more robust in Maryland, because it just helps people be the best employers that they can be. And without any kind of HR background, it's really hard to know what's correct and what's equitable and fair and legal. So having that training, I think, is really important.
That makes so much sense. Pam, anything you would add?
So I agree with everything you guys said, and Christiana, we will absolutely connect. In Pennsylvania, it's a few years back. So when did I become certified? I don't even remember. 6 years ago, maybe. It was it's a robust process we go through. At that time, you were required to go through about 7 hours of online modules as a prerequisite to attending a 2-day in-person training certification process that covered multiple things. Rules, regulations, HR stuff, discrimination in employment hiring, navigating natural supports, person-centered tools, sort of a basis for, here's sort of your toolkit, now go and become a broker, and really emphasized you have to have the ability to find information, to look for it, to research, not only for yourself in your job, but for those you're supporting. We recently, and when by recently, I mean really recently, the waiver in Pennsylvania renewed on January 1st of this year, 2023. And in the renewed waiver, there is now a requirement that certified supports brokers complete a recertification every 3 years. So I just did that last week. It was an all day, 8 hours. Right now it's virtual. It will eventually be in person again. 8 hours of training, a lot of really good information, but a lot of information on change to rules, change to regulations, refreshers on things. And then we have to take a test at the end. We also had to do that with the initial certification, and you're required to pass, I think, with an 80% or higher. And I'll be honest with you, I do this every day, all day. One of the parts of my job is I'm the person reading the policy, interpreting the policy for the folks who work with me. And I was nervous when I took the test that I wasn't going to pass it, but I did. I'm very, very happy that I did. And I actually texted my boss and said, I think I'm going to schedule my retirement for the day before I have to recertify in 3 years, because it was stressful. And then in between that, so in Pennsylvania, we have support brokerages, which are companies, organizations that employ brokers, but we also have certified supports brokers who work directly for the person, and then they're paid through the financial management service that they've selected. In our supports brokerage, we do a tremendous amount of training for our employees on everything and anything. We do the typical training that states require all providers to do, and then we provide so much training. We actually just recently formally adopted the Charting the Life course framework and are embedding it into our organization across the board. So almost every employee we have went through the foundational training and is certified in that now. And then a select, I think we have 15 or 16 people, including a person that we support, who went through the Ambassador Series training and just graduated, I think, 2 weeks ago. And they are now Charting Life course ambassadors, and will be, spreading that knowledge with everybody and anybody who wants to listen to us about it. So we see training as always ongoing. We're always looking for trainings on person-centered planning tools, anything that's sort of the next level. We're never satisfied with like status quo. We're always looking for what can make people's lives better, and sharing that with others who may or may not receive services from us. We're very open to sharing what we learn with everybody, in the hopes that everybody out there gets the quality of life they deserve.
Really helpful to hear about that. And Pam, congrats on passing your test. I'm glad that you're over that hurdle.
It's stressful.
Yeah, I'm glad it's behind you. I do want to acknowledge we have about 15 minutes left, so we have a few more questions that we're going to discuss with the panelists, but we do want to have time to answer your questions. So I just want to plant the seed with our audience. As you're listening to our panel, please feel free to start submitting those questions, and we'll get to those shortly. We want to make sure we answer as many as we can. But I want to talk a little bit about, speaking of the audience, I'm sure we have people here who are, working at the state level as state program staff, or have otherwise, some type of program decision-making role in self-direction. What do you wish folks knew about this information and assistance role, who maybe have never had it before, but are in a position to make key decisions about self-direction? Pam, why don't you start us with that one?
So happy to start with that one. And I think we have a very good relationship and partnership with the Office of Developmental Programs, especially with the team there, the executive team that focuses on self-direction and the participant-directed services. So we talk with them often. We sit on work groups and committees with them. So there's always dialogue going back and forth between us. So they hear from us often. We also have a support brokerage network. So every certified supports broker in the Commonwealth is part of that network. And there's a listserv that the Office of Developmental Programs also has access to. So they see in real time what the issues are, what the conversation is. So I can't really think of anything very specific, except for when those unusual, unexpected events happen. And we do share them with them, and they happen. How does a family react when there's suddenly a parent passes away? And now maybe that parent was the common law employer. There's nobody in place to approve payroll on Monday. So those are the things that I share with them. And they're very understanding. They're always very supportive, and we figure it out. But to really help them understand that and when I say we, I mean family members, we carry this with us. We do the best we can. We try our hardest to keep everything moving forward. And but things happen that disrupt that. And we want the state policy makers to understand that. And we believe they do. We're also very fortunate that our deputy secretary came from the world of self-direction. She actually came to Pennsylvania and helped create the pilot for supports brokering. So it's in her blood. She understands it. We're not the red-haired stepchild. We are at the forefront of what they do. So I just want to give kudos to my state, because as a family member, we are really happy that they are as supportive as they are.
It's wonderful to hear. Christiana, is there anything you would add that you want decision makers to consider in here?
I think that because we are a baby program, as I like to call it, we're evolving. Somebody said our program is like we're in a airplane that we are building as we go. And so I don't believe that the lawmakers really understand the need for independent facilitators, brokers. We have 21 different regional centers who do it 21 different ways. And so it is a very bureaucratic, challenging system to figure out. And for the parents, it is very difficult to navigate. And sometimes when you're in the system, you don't realize what other people don't know. And they forget to tell people like big chunks of information. And so I really hope that our state decision makers will really start to understand the role of independent facilitators and the need for them, specifically because of those challenges in our state.
Well said. I'm going to jump into some of the questions that have been submitted so we can make sure we address those. I see a question. I think we'll start with Christy on this one, because I think this is based on your comment. Curious what benefits you can offer employees and how to access those.
I saw it and I was so excited. I was like, oh, I hope I get to answer this one. So this is something I'm super passionate about. So in Maryland right now, this second, people who self-direct can offer their employees mileage reimbursement, training reimbursement, and the time to go to the training. So wages for that training, paid time off. So that can be broken down into holiday time and sick time and vacation time, or just paid time off. And that's separate from, in some counties in Maryland, we have a sick and safe leave requirement. So that's separate from sick and safe, and it being a different kind of paid leave. And then reimbursement or pay of a health insurance premium. So an employee would get would find a policy that makes sense for them, and the employer would pay into that premium to a certain amount based on the policy that they have. We want to be a really innovative state, so we tend to think about benefits like contributions to oh gosh, contributions to retirement. That's something that we need to figure out. There's some logistics that we still have to figure out. And I think also contributions to education plans. So the things that other employers offer, we want that to be as flexible as possible in our state. So we have what we currently do, and we're really trying to be innovative and adding to those. And then just to be clear too, these would be individual policies of these employers of record. So people who self-direct. So the health insurance wouldn't come from the fiscal intermediary like other states. It would come from directly from the employee. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing more of that. Pam and Christiana, I don't know if either of you would have more to say on benefits before I move us on.
We have similar where we have different models that you can use. So we have a co-employer, which would be like a fiscal intermediary, and we have to follow their rules for their organization. But we also have sole employer, which means they can become the employer of record, which means they could offer any of the things Christy talked about. And she gave me a couple ideas in there, so yay.
Yeah, we are similar to California in that we have two models. One is a co-employer, and then it would be whatever that organization's policy is. If you're full-time, you get whatever they get. In the other model, the vendor fiscal model, where you become the common law employer, there are no benefits in it, except that we can offer what's called a benefit allowance. So it's additional money on top of what your hourly rate is. And I think it's about $2 an hour. I'm not sure exactly what it is. The intention of that is that you as the employee use that money to, pay for healthcare. It compensates you for when you go on vacation. You could put it in a retirement plan, but there are no rules requiring you to do that. I mean, you could literally take it and blow it at the mall if you chose to, but that's the intention of it. One of the things that I have always wanted and have spoken with some legislators about is the consideration of healthcare benefits for people who self-direct, because it is a challenge. People need healthcare, and we lose good employees not because they don't like their job, it's because they need healthcare and they go to other employers.
Thank you. So another comment and question that we've received. This person says, I'm a self-direction broker in New York, and I hear often that the self-directed services available in other states are not nearly what is available in New York. But there are many participants and families who have an interest in relocating to another state, and hearing that stops them. Does anyone know if there are other states that have a model that is similar to the New York self-directed one? If so, please share which states do. Thank you. And I know you all might not have the context of what exactly New York looks like, but I think, if you have recommendations for, full-fledged self-direction with a lot of flexibility and robust choice and control, curious if any of you would recommend anything.
I would say California does have full, like I said, baby program. We're growing. I think that the state in our developmental system has 400,000 participants, and we have about 2,500 in self-determination programs. So when I talk baby, I'm talking baby. So we're growing, but it does give you the full flexibility that I'm not familiar with New York, so I can't say comparable, but check us out.
Yeah, I agree with what Christiana is saying, and I don't know what New York's program looks like, but I can say as a person, as a mom of someone who uses services in Pennsylvania, we have a really good program here. Everything can be improved, but we're happy with it. He has all the choice and control he can have. There's a lot of services available within it to him based on, it's all based on need. But we haven't come up with a scenario where he needed something that there wasn't a service available that would help him with that. So I would recommend you look at Pennsylvania.
I'll just add from a national perspective, looking at a lot of different states. I'm not going to recommend any particular state, but I will say thinking of anybody who's looking to move from one state to another and knowing that programs are quite different, I'd really recommend looking at what are some of the features of the program that have been most important to you, and really looking to see if the state you're looking to relocate has that same feature, because self-direction in one state is not the same thing in another state. And I think reaching out to advocacy groups in those states, someone will be able to help answer some of your questions more specifically. And Pam, go ahead. I see you have a
I'm
thought.
going to add one more thing. I would also recommend you look at whether or not there are waiting lists in those states. Because you don't want to, up and move and then you're on a wait list and not receiving services.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have time for at least this one last question I'm seeing. Any thoughts on salaries? Many people with disabilities have a lot of need for intermittent care. They want their staff to make a good wage, but coming in only for those few hours they really need them makes it hard to make sure they're taken care of. Has anyone set up a salary with a minimum amount of hours per week set in the budget? Then the FMS would adjust the rate as needed to pay that salary.
So I would say in Maryland, we've fully transitioned to a fee-for-service model, which I think is great for people, because then people have access to the funds based on the services that they've received. So when someone works half an hour, that's what gets billed to us from the FMCS. And if that's more or less than what was budgeted, that means that the person has access to those funds for other things they might need them for. So I think fee for service allows for the most flexibility for people.
Pam and Christiane, I don't know if you'd add anything.
We have similar, and so it is set by the participant what rate they want to pay. So again, given a big budget number, and then they have their spending plan of however they want to spend it, so they can have increased rates. So like we might have a discounted rate for overnight, and higher, like they said, for part-time or those kind of things. So they're allowed to set the rate, and it varies in our state because of cost of living rates radically. So
in Pennsylvania, we have wage ranges based on the service that the employee is delivering, and the person who is the person with disability gets to determine what the pay rate is within those ranges that are set by the state. So it varies. The low end of the wage range is minimum wage, which I'm hoping nobody's paying minimum wage. No one I am aware of, and it goes up pretty high depending on what service it is. And we also have enhanced services, which allows the ranges to go a bit higher. So as long as you have budget capacity, and that depends on what type of waiver you receive, as some of the waivers are capped at a certain amount of money. There's a lot of flexibility in being able to pay people a really good wage. Some others experience, because their budgets, they can't go above that ceiling in their budget, struggle a bit more with that.
Well, this has been a wonderful discussion. We're at time, so I regretfully have to end us, but Christy, Christiana, and Pam, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and having this discussion today. I think it's been a great mix of perspectives, and really wonderful to see the areas in which you all are kind of seeing these common themes. To everybody who joined us today, thank you for joining us, and thank you for being part of this virtual conference series. We are just so thrilled to be able to do this, and thanks to our sponsors for making it possible. And we'll hope to talk to you all sometime soon, but thank you so much for making today happen.